Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
It is June 2nd, everybody. Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch. I'm Catherine White, your host, bringing you the guests, the issues, the action, fueling the grassroots community to get things done, to make politics fun. So let's get perked up together. I'm so excited about this theme, making history differently, and the guest today. Hopefully they're channeling some Tina Turner. So let's find out. Bringing up our first guest, BOGGS Roberts. Welcome, Rebecca. You are the author of Untold Power, the fascinating rise and complex legacy of the First Lady, Edith Wilson. Ooh, that's a mouthful, not a short title. Your books are always really long titles because there's a lot in them. So how are you channeling Tina Turner today?
Well, thank you for the ability to rock out a little bit in the middle of my workday. And thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the next hour. Yeah,
like we said, I am too. And because your other book really was also another inspiration, because we were talking in the green room about the suffragette memorial that was built over here in Lorton. And you wrote the book about the suffragists. And that book was Suffragists in Washington, D.C., the 1913 parade and the fight for the vote. And today, this book about Edith Wilson, what a titillating little special delight we're going to have in that segment, because talk about women making history differently. So we appreciate your work. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's go. I love it. And then next up, badass Lauren Burke, journalist, podcaster, and publisher of Black Virginia News, is somebody that's doing it her way. You've been doing it your way your whole life, my friend. How are you channeling Tina Turner today?
Oh, I think I'm channeling I need her energy. And shout out to John Fogerty, proving that it's a good song. Anyone can sing it and it'll blow up. I've had an extremely busy morning. Thanks for the energy and thanks for the blast of Tina Turner, because it's not even noon here on the East Coast and a lot has happened.
It is true. There's a lot to talk about today. So, and I know I subscribe now, and everybody should subscribe to Black Virginia News, because doing it differently, you do, and you bring the news and you bring it like the way you want it. And I love it. So thank you. And talk about doing things differently to get out the vote. I love it. I love it. We have Chris Diaz here, the executive director of Dragging Out the Vote. And so tell us how you're channeling Tina Turner, maybe this week and this month. What's up your sleeve, my friend?
Listen, this month we need to embody the power and the strength and the perseverance of Miss Tina. And that's what we're doing here at Drag Out the Vote. I'm so grateful to be in the presence of such powerful women, and just grateful for the opportunity to speak and be in community with all of you today.
I know. I'm so excited to talk to you later, and we have so much to go over. It's just, could you imagine that drag could be so popular and in the news every day, but not always in the right ways, we say. So I'm so glad to have you here and talk about your special organization. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. I'm so excited. I also want to say that we're lucky to have today, Susan Hartford is going to be a special guest interviewer for the segment that we will have with Rebecca and Lauren. So thank you for Susan for putting this together. And for everybody in the room, the rules of the road. If you're new, welcome. Michelle McKinney is our chat liaison. If you have any issues in the room, please reach out to Michelle. She will tell you what you need to do, or if you have any questions, she's happy to answer them. And rules of the road, we just stay friendly in the chat. Say what you want to say, be you. But if you get super nasty or just, inappropriate, the bouncer up there will kick you out. That's Stair Calhoun's job. So thank you for that. And also, after chat, well, we love 1 o'clock, and 1 o'clock means that we will spend some time together to be in community. There's so much to talk about today. I don't know about you, but sick about the MVP pipeline. We know that in the debt ceiling crisis, that dirty deal with Manchin, what the hell? I'm just this. So anyways, can't wait to talk about that. And also other items on the agenda that you will bring in the after chat. Lastly, let's get loud and proud for Pride Month. We know that I'm sure Louisa Borowski's so glad she's back today to report out, but we hope that you have some great plans for Pride Month and that you're wearing your orange, you're rocking it, because it is Wear Orange for June for gun prevention for violence. Thank you. All right, lastly, support our show if you want. Why not? Our Untold Power is that we bring the show every week, and we're glad you're in the room. A little bit of money every week goes to us, and we really appreciate it. Keeps our Zoom lights on, so thank you for that. Now, I am so excited to bring up Louisa Borowski, our wonderful Virginia grassroots leader. And I'm missing Fennell right now, so I'm so glad you're here with me. And I've missed you these last month. You've been in Spain and everywhere.
Well, I was in Portugal, and before that, I was in Jordan. And yes, work has been busy. I am getting ready for 50 nonprofit leaders to come to Georgetown for our executive certificate starting next Saturday. So it's the first time we're doing things in person again, which is really exciting at the university. So things are good, but.
So what I'm going to say to you, bring all those 50 people Friday night to the Women's Summit. We'll get, come on in, right? Something new. Well, I'm excited to hear what you have to say because it's all action and let's go.
Yeah. So in Virginia, as we all know, the biggest thing that everyone should be talking about are early voting. We need people getting to the polls, not just because it's important to vote because it's a democratic right, but because for many of our jurisdictions, your vote is going to matter in the primaries, and whoever gets elected in the primary will likely be elected in the general. So if you want to weigh in on important races like your state Senate race, your state House race, your school board race, your county board race, your sheriff's race, this is the time to do it. I just went and did votes in vino with my lovely friends from WOFA last night. So we all got together at 4:30. We went to the registrars in Arlington, we cast our votes, we took some photos, and then we went and had some wine together because we should make voting fun. But I will say it's really important to be paying attention to what's on the ballot because there are also some new ways that some of our jurisdictions are doing this, right? So in Arlington County, for our county board seats, we're using ranked choice voting. And it's really important to think about, well, what is the ranked choice voting strategy, for you as a voter? Because the way ranked choice works generally is you choose your top person that you really want to have that seat. But if they don't get chosen, then your vote will go to the next person that you ranked as number 2. But so you want to think through, okay, how do I want my vote to count? When do I want my vote to count? Do I have a sense of who might be a front runner? Maybe they don't need my vote as number 1 because I really want to make sure this number 2 person has a really good chance of getting elected, right? So it's a little bit more strategy than we're used to, not the same as just filling out one bubble. We got to fill out multiple bubbles in different columns. So come prepared. And I think the other big thing for everyone in this room is talk to your friends and neighbors. I think there are some really difficult decisions that we have to make in these primaries. If you look at the state Senate, we have at least 5 really close state primary races, state Senate primaries, where we have the opportunity to either elect the Democratic incumbent or elect someone who often might be a little bit more progressive. And it's a really important decision for people to be talking about and making. So I'm just going to remind everyone which those races are. We've got the Aird versus Morrissey race. We've got the Drawcheck versus Marsden race. We've got the Pekarsky versus Barker race, the Foy versus Ayala race, and the Salim versus Peterson race. So I really want folks to be thinking critically about how are you engaging in these primaries. Obviously, please vote early. Please make sure other people know how easy it is to vote early. But in addition to that, get involved in these primaries. I'm going to put a couple of options in the chat, which I just happen to have available. One is a phone bank for Lasharice Aird. Another is a canvas for Heidi Drawcheck. But if you have others, I encourage you to put them in the chat as well. We really don't have that much time left before June 20th to get people engaged and knowledgeable about what's happening in the primaries this year. Of course, the Virginia Grassroots Coalition is also looking forward to our general elections, and we're coming up with a strategy for how we want to adopt candidates this year so we can make sure that we are distributing all of our energy in a way that's most effective and efficient. So the way we're planning on doing this is we're going to be designing what we're calling power packs. Thank you to Stair. Thank you, Stair. And the power packs are the concept of how are we grouping campaigns together where they overlap in jurisdictions to make sure that when we're canvassing for them or we're supporting them at a fundraiser or, we are writing postcards for them, we're also helping the other campaigns that overlap with their space. So for example, you've got Prince William County, where Danica Rome has already created her own power pack, overlapping with 3 different House races. But what we're going to be doing at our Sunday Virginia Grassroots Coalition meeting is actually looking at the data and looking at which power packs are out there. And we're going to encourage each group to adopt one power pack, right? That gives you the chance to support a Senate candidate, a number of House races, and the local races too, which we know are so critically important as well. Additionally, we do want to encourage you, not everyone's going to fit in a power pack. So we want to say, please also pick one additional candidate who's a bit of a stretch race, but really important in investing in. Either we could possibly flip it this year, or maybe we're building the ground to do really well in the next cycle. But we want to have that further outreach because, as we know, the typical groups who are going to fundraise and invest in the elections this year are going to ignore those candidates. So we want to make sure that we are taking them seriously and getting excited for them, just like we heard from Tina. This is really important role for us as well. So I want to invite you to our coalition meeting that is happening on Sunday, starting at 6 p.m. We will be doing some strategy work there. As I mentioned, we have 2 guest speakers. We have candidate Salim is joining us, as well as candidate Birgij from the Loudoun County. So we're excited to hear from both of them. And the last thing I just wanted to mention, Catherine, as you alluded to, Mountain Valley Pipeline, not the way we wanted it to go. However, we do have our pipelines working group, and they are thinking through what are our next set of strategies. One of the things that we've been trying to do over the last couple of years was to get some of the companies that are bought into the pipeline to decide it's really not a good business model for them. So instead of looking to the government to make these choices, we can also look to the business sector and say, you also can think critically about this, and this just doesn't make sense for you either. Right. So there are lots of angles, and just as a reminder, so advocacy can happen both within the halls of government, but also outside of government in the corporate sector and in other places. So we are looking at all options that are still on the table.
Right. We know, the folks have been working on this for years too. It just killed me to see that insertion into that debt crisis bill that had nothing to do with the debt issue, right? We know that. And then it just subverts the people. I mean, this is sort of a people thing, as we say. It really just gets people just a little bit revved up. Okay, the fox is here. You can hear the dog in the background. But I do want to talk about the Women's Summit.
Yes.
We want to have a little plug because Friday night at the Women's Summit, let's just talk for new people in the room that part of this whole group. And when Louisa talked about the coalition, this last so many years working together, we have this great event called the Women's Summit. And on Friday night, Louisa, we're going to be doing all about grassroots power, and it's going to be called Grassroots Rise Up. We have Delegate Sam Russell coming, of course. And you know how we used to meet in the basement?
I know. So I'm so excited to kind of relive. So all good social movements, as we all know, start in church basements. And so this social movement also started in a church basement in Arlington, Virginia. And we want to get that feel back. I think the challenge it's so great that we have Zoom because it allows our statewide coalition to work across the state. But we need to have time back in person. We need to have time to reconnect. We need to have time to have these strategic conversations about how are we supporting our candidates this election? What other issues, including the MVP, do we really need to come up with some new strategies for? And all that good stuff often happens, when we're in person, sometimes with a drink in our hands, sometimes But very excited to have that opportunity to get the grassroots back together again and give everybody time to be on the agenda. So this will feel like a coalition meeting in its own way, where you get to come, share what you're up to, and we can have some really great, strategy time together, and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we'll, Nope Neighbors will be coming from Maryland. We'll have some power hitters there. We have also Sister District. We have the Swing Left. What we want is all these groups coming together Friday night. It'll be like 7:30 p.m. That's July 22nd. Get your ticket. Robin, do you want to show the graphic? And get your ticket and bring a friend. Here's the challenge. What we need from you, we've organized this all. We have over 3 days. And you can plug and play. I mean, you can go shopping on one day if you really want to, teasing. But that's July 21st, 22nd, 23rd at the Hilton McLean Union Hotel in Tyson's Corner. And we're going to have great speakers. We have over 70 speakers. We have over 34 workshops. We are going to have over 3 stages. We're going to have performers. We're going to have it all. And what we're going to have is the candidates. And if you're a candidate in the room right now, use your emoji reaction and put your hand up. These candidates need our help and they want to meet with us. They will be coming. We'll have special workshops for them. We have especially school board, the grassroots coming together with these candidates, like you said, the Jessica Andersons out in Williamsburg, that are these candidates that may not be getting all the attention they need. They will get it at the summit. We will have resources for them, and those power packs will be on the stage. So get your ticket, help us. We need to sell at least 300 more tickets. We've already sold hundreds of tickets. We need some more so we can fill those seats up, and invite your friend, because everybody goes when your friend is going. And lastly, Robin put in the chat, we are going to have an all-call volunteer call. If you want to help us at the summit, you want to be part of the rest of the planning team, please come to the meeting. We'll put it into the Zoom, and also come to the coalition meeting, because that's where it happens. So thank you. That was a lot, but I think it was worth it.
Absolutely. Well, so great to be back with everyone. I will be here again next week with additional updates. And but please, if you are available, come to our Sunday's coalition meeting, where we will dive deeper into a lot of these topics related to the primaries and the general elections.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to those that have their hands up. Glad you're running. Thank you. I see Marty and I see Tracy. Thank you so much. Put your Act Blues in the chat. You never know if someone will throw you. Oh, Susan Hippen, there she is. Put your Act Blue in. You never know when somebody throws you 10 or 20 bucks. It could help you on call time today. I know you guys all are sitting on call time as well. All right, let's get to it. I'd like to bring up Susan Hartford, friend of, and has been in the movement with us for years, just an awesome activist. Thank you, Susan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here with everybody as usual. I always love these power lunches and the energy you get, even without Tina Turner, but that was fantastic.
I know, get you revved up, but I'm so glad. I want to say a little bit about you, because I never get to say the special things. I always just know you're a badass organizer, activist. You are president and publisher of Deliberate Families, and has been a member of Network Nova. Yes, since 2017. You live in Fauquier County. God bless you. And you've been an active grassroots volunteer in the many campaigns around Virginia, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and that's for sure. And today you brought us this segment, and let's bring up the guest that we want to discuss today. Rebecca Roberts, we already met her, but let's just say that she writes history books about strong women. Her latest book, Untold Power: The Fascinating Rise and Complex Legacy of the First Lady, Edith Wilson. What a great story. And it spotlights a relatively unknown First Lady who wielded power in her husband's administration. Your other books has focused on suffragists, and we talked about that earlier. And today we're so excited to have you. So thank you for being here. And then your partner in crime, your friend, Lauren Burke, journalist, podcaster, and founder of Black Virginia News, will both be sharing this in this conversation with Susan, about how contemporary women, like their sisters before them, have to work twice as hard as men to get the rightful place in history. Or you could talk about whatever the heck you want. But I'm going to hand it over to Susan to get us started. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Rebecca and Lauren, for joining us. I just want to start with When I was developing this concept and sharing it with Catherine on, the idea, inspired by your book, Rebecca, which is a classic truth is stranger than fiction kind of story that was quite inspiring on how women do wield power. And then I was thinking hard and soft power and different voices and all this. And I actually was already thinking of pairing the two of you, as you know, because I asked you, well, do you know this Lauren Burke? When I called you, and I was stunned and shocked to know that you guys know each other. So can you share a little bit about your story, Lauren? How do you know Rebecca?
Oh, wow. So I know Rebecca because I worked for Rebecca's mother, Cokie Roberts, back in the 1990s. And at that time, I was going to American University for history. And had it not been for Cokie Roberts, I would have never gotten a degree because I was.
She bullied you into it.
Yeah, she absolutely, thank goodness, bullied me into it. I effectively had a third parent. I kept failing a math class and finally said, you know what? I'm tired of my parents having to pay for this math class. At that time, American University required finite math. At any rate, they didn't have the math for poets that they have now. Anyway, Cokie convinced me to keep going, and I finally got the degree. So that's long and short of it. Rebecca Roberts, this book is incredible. I'm a history nut. And of course, when you're a history nut, everyone tells you, why are you graduating in history? You need to do something that actually makes money. I heard that my entire life. But, after reading this book, it just sort of, re-reminds me of the value of history and how far we've come, how far people have to struggle. The Edith Wilson story, to me, this would make a fantastic movie, in my view. It is something, I globally, of course, knew that Woodrow Wilson had a stroke. I think people generally would know that history. But of course, the details with regard to how much Edith Wilson was actually running the country, I was not fully aware of until listening to this book. So I was also interested to see, Rebecca, I'd seen a few interviews you had already done on this where you were saying that you didn't necessarily want to say that Edith Wilson was actually running the country because you don't want to take away from the person who will eventually be the first female president. But it's actually hard to do that because she actually this was more than just, serving a few biscuits and then that was it. She was in part. So I cannot wait to hear, the details. I have a few questions for you, Rebecca, but I can't wait to hear how you want to steer this conversation because there's a lot of places to go, but it's a very, very good book. I highly recommend it.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. Yeah, there are a lot of places to go. And probably other people on this call have been bullied into being their best selves by Cokie Roberts, but Lauren and I are certainly among them.
Well, having said that, I think there's also even more than just Edith's story in terms of this book. And I don't want to get into that now, but I really want to recommend everybody take a look because, the presidency has changed a lot since that time. And I kind of wonder, I think it's good that it changed based on what I read in your book and some things. So I really encourage everybody to take a look beyond even the Edith story. Both of you, in your own ways, have had ringside seats with family and friends and professionally to women making history differently. That's really important to think about. And so first, Rebecca, I wanted to start with you. What drew you to Edith's story and how she's making or how she made history differently?
Yeah, I mean, in very broad strokes, the one thing people know about Edith, if they know anything, is that in 1919, when Woodrow Wilson suffered a massive stroke, she stepped in, acted as the chief executive to the degree anybody was acting as the executive at that point, and lied about what she was doing, lied about how sick the president was, lied to the press, to the public, to the Congress, to the cabinet, to the vice president, to the president himself. He never knew how sick he was. And that's sort of an astonishing chapter of history But when I started looking into her story more fully, what really got me was how well she had covered her tracks, not just because what she was doing was, unconstitutional, no one elected Edith to anything, but she grew up in a time, she was born in the 1870s, when it was not nice for women to make news, right? You were supposed to be in the paper for your birth and your marriage and maybe your debut. And then that was all we were meant to hear from the nice girls until their obituary. And she wrote a whole memoir. She was the first lady to write a memoir where she downplayed what she did. And like, who writes a whole memoir to downplay their role in history? Like, no man ever.
Right.
And so it was just fascinating to me how much she curated her own image and threw up all these smoke and mirrors to make it clear, to anyone who was only accepting her narrative, that it just wasn't that big a deal. And I think it requires a sort of wholesale rethinking of our Hall of Fame model of history, because it's not like women haven't been agents of social change forever. They just haven't been out front in the roles that get you into the Hall of Fame, right? They haven't been the generals and the executives until recently. And so it's not even just a like, oh, there was a woman there too kind of history. It's like actually affecting social change happens differently when you are not in the big visible position of power. That's why the suffrage movement was so interesting to me. That was entirely by women, and it took them 72 years, but they effected the largest change to American democracy without resorting to, open warfare. And so I'm really...
And we're still not finished, if you don't mind me saying.
No question. But I think that whole conversation about recognizing that history happens in a lot of different ways is ongoing. It's all part of the revisiting of monuments we're doing, and revising the reputation of people like Woodrow Wilson, and rethinking what it actually means to be a history changer.
So do you think we have a lot of echoes from that suffragist movement going on today? And both of you, please speak to this. And if so, what do you think they might be? So obviously, I'm assuming you do think that.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I'd be curious to hear what Lauren says about this. Certainly in terms of tactics, right? It is stunning how many tactics that activists are using really effectively now were invented by the suffragists. They were the first to march on Washington. They were the first to picket the White House. I promise you, if you go to the White House right this second, there's somebody protesting in Lafayette Square. No one had ever done that before the suffragists did it. And that incredible, look at all of these amazing pride images that are showing up on this Zoom. That idea that you need to pay attention to the image, have a good logo, really make a message visual in addition to text. Like, think of those suffragists standing in front of the White House with the banners in 1917. Those were tweets. They were just the 1917 version of trying to make a message go viral by stitching it onto a banner and making sure you looked good in pictures so that the men who ran the newspapers would publicize it. So I see suffrage tactics constantly, everywhere. Once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it.
What do you think, Lauren?
Yeah, the level of iconography, that entire effort is amazing. One of my big takeaways for the book, though, was that I thought it was interesting the adjustments that a person has to make, even knowing that something is right. I suspect Edith Wilson, obviously it's hard to psychoanalyze somebody 100 years later, but I suspect she probably knew that the suffragette movement was the right thing. But also you have the internal voice in your head saying that that if you come out publicly and you're for it, you're going to have some blowback, particularly in the position that she was in. But yes, I mean, obviously iconography and the protest in front, Edith Wilson too, being someone who had a few firsts that were really interesting. The first lady to travel outside the country, the first to have memoirs. I just thought some of those things were really, cool and interesting. And
I
so
do think we need to make it clear, though, to everybody, she was not really supportive of the suffragist movement.
Right.
No, quite the opposite, which kills me, right? She was this independent, fierce. She owned her own business. She was the first woman in Washington to drive a car. She was a trailblazer in so many ways, and yet did not want to exercise her full rights as a citizen. I will say, once she got the right, she used it. She voted.
She did. But so, do you think we're building on that? Do you think we're innovating some of those techniques today, and learning to take credit a little bit more?
I hope we are. I mean, at the end of the day, so much of what happens with the recording of history and the real-time recording journalistically is who is writing that history, who is making that decision to highlight certain things. And Rebecca, I was interested to hear that someone had advised Edith that the last 3 chapters of her memoir should be somehow left off. I suspect in my mind that someone was probably male, but, and it's also interesting, and I may want to talk a little bit on this, that she in fact had to adjust a lot of her story in her memoirs to effectively be appropriate to that time period. I think we're certainly outside of that, of having to do that now, but it's another reminder of how, when you are in a marginalized group, you have to play these games. Certainly Black women and Black people understand this. It's like white women as well have to make all of these adjustments for greater society and not appear like you're, in control, or you're, obviously.
Or you're strident. You still hear that.
Exactly. And if she had been male, she would have been strategic, and she would have been, ambitious. Ambitious and a master of Machiavellian political art. And of course, she's got to somehow hide this in her memoirs. But I think we're certainly getting away from that in our politics now, but you still see bias. I mean, I think the most recent examples that are very glaringly obvious is the way Hillary Clinton was covered during her campaign, which is a complete double standard. And to me, the way Kamala Harris is covered is a complete double standard. I mean, it's just things that were not covered when, Vice President Pence was here, or really any other vice president. But, you do see the personal adjustments that people in politics will make, knowing full well that greater society is going to have a problem accepting their full story, their full story as authentically told by them.
I want to throw this a little bit to Catherine, because she had, when we were talking about this and you guys coming on, she had a great question inspired by the book also, on shape-shifting. I'll throw it to you, Catherine.
Oh yeah, I was just so engrossed in the conversation, I was forgetting I was actually on screen over here. That ability, and I think that Lauren, you're speaking to it, and the shape-shifting part, where she could, deeply invested in exercising her own power while also opposing women's suffrage, that kind of shape-shifting kind of idea. I feel like when I think about Phyllis Schlafly or Nancy Reagan or some of those people, speak to that a little bit about, and I think you did touch on that, about that shape-shifting quality that.
Yeah. And I think it's what Lauren was saying too, that you, as a woman, and even more so as a woman of color, you make compromises about the public persona you can present and still be acceptable. And while you want to be authentic and true to yourself, you also want to be successful. And if you're being told, if whatever you say is being received as shrill or unfeminine in some way, you react. The angry Black woman thing is real. And so, I think we all spend a lot of time making sure that not only is our message palatable, but the presentation of it is as well. And Edith was the queen of that. And 100 years earlier, even more so, because the spectrum of acceptable behavior for women, especially for privileged white women, was even narrower than it is now. So she, I think because of that, because she told everyone she was just being the most dutiful wife she could be, and it was all in service to him, people have reduced her to that character, and just sort of dismissed her as wifely. If they're not dismissing her as some Machiavellian Lady Macbeth or some, country mouse naive rube. Those are kind of the three two-dimensional stock characters. And, none of those can be true. No stock character ever is. And I didn't come away from this with a wholesale admiration of Edith Wilson. She made some compromises that are deeply, deeply flawed. But I did come away from it realizing she was a whole human being. And I think that kind of, because historical figures do curate their own image, and because we have this limited lens through which we think it's acceptable to be a history maker, we tend to fall into that kind of hero villain binary.
Right.
And, that's, first of all, it's really boring, but it's also, I think it's liberating to find out that people who changed the world are flawed, right? It means that all of us can do it too.
Right.
All of our flaws.
Yeah, Lauren, what's your insight on that? And then we're going to have to go to wrap up soon.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, at the end of the day, no one is immune from the internal voice, the thing on their shoulder saying that, I really want to say this thing, or I really understand that this is probably not right. But what you do see in history is that the leaders that move the needle are typically the ones that, I guess you could say, ignore the internal voice and just forge ahead, because nothing gets done. I mean, we know this, certainly in women's history, nothing happens without controversy, without pushing, without being the person who challenges the orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been extremely difficult for women, as you guys know, throughout history. But when that needle moved, it moved because someone had to step over the line and not listen to the internal voice. So it's she was in a complicated situation. Obviously, no one could have foretold that her husband was going to have a stroke, and then she's in this position where she's actually running things. But it's just a great book. I hope that somebody picks it up as a movie. I'm just going to put that out there again.
Catherine,
I'm just going to put that into the universe, Rebecca.
Catherine, before you wrap up, though, I just want to, call out to all of us badasses here that, we have not gone over the goal line.
I know.
With the ERA. And we've got to take credit. So
yeah.
I thought you were going to say we haven't gone over the goal line with the first woman president.
Right.
Well, and that too.
Oh, goodness.
That too.
Yeah.
So let's just know that and maybe push ourselves a little bit further with that.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you guys are here to talk about this. And I do think that when we talk about people making history differently, it's also you, Rebecca and Lauren, how you look at things differently. And I think what is instructive to us is when we're looking to look differently with a different lens. And that's obviously how you find people like Edith, and you find those letters, like you said, women write differently. You learn so much more interest in their letters. I love that when you wrote about that, but I'm grateful that you are looking at history with your lens and discovering these wonderful stories. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. And Lauren, thank you. We'll see you at the Women's Summit. Everybody, just so you know, get your ticket. You can meet Lauren in person. She'll be at the Badass Brunch. So thank you.
Thank you.
I always have to do a plug, that's why.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Susan, for putting this together. We so appreciate you. It's awesome. Thanks. All right. So, wow, I'm so excited to drag us to the next segment with Christopher Diaz, Drag Out the Vote. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
I know. Are you enjoying the show so far?
I am. It's such an incredible privilege to be in a space with, as you said, such incredibly badass women. So I'm so fortunate and so blessed to be here.
Yes, we have badass women, men, we have it all in this room, and we're making progress together. And I'm so excited to find out about Drag Out the Vote. Didn't know about it till we were attending one event, and then learned about it. We're like, we have to contact them. So give us the 411 about your organization and some of the background and history.
Absolutely. Drag Out the Vote was founded in 2019 by Jackie Huba. And what we do is that we use the art and the activism of drag to educate, register, and turn out voters. One of the first things that we did in 2020 is that we launched our drag ambassador program and recruited over 300 drag artists in 44 states to serve as digital organizers in the 2020 general election. So that's what we do. We make sure that LGBTQI community has the resources, has the information that they need to get themselves to the polls.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I see that really we're talking about drag now. It's really entertainment, performance, and now we see it as political, right? Politicized and being used in such a destructive way against the community. So how has that changed, or in the sense of your plans and all the great work you've done before? Some of the numbers that you moved really in registering voters were quite astonishing. What are your plans now with the kind of Proud Boys showing up at stuff, some of this stuff coming at you? Do you have plans for this year that are different, or are you just going to keep going at it, or what's your organization's
I think to your first question, to your first point, drag has always been political. Drag has always been political since its inception. Drag queens have a long history of shepherding the queer community through incredibly difficult times. And right now what we're seeing in the country is we're seeing an onslaught of legislation targeting the art of drag and the queer community at large. Right. One of the things that Drag Out the Vote is doing and working with our drag ambassadors, here's the thing. They're hungry. They're hungry to be involved. They're hungry to take action. They're hungry to take leadership in their own communities. And right now, that's what we need in this kind of time of strife. And one of the things that Drag Out the Vote is doing to prepare our drag ambassadors, and we have a lot of great new things kind of in the works for 2023 as well as 2024, is that we're going to provide our drag ambassadors with media training so that when they go out into their communities and they're faced with some of the potential conflicts that you had mentioned from whatever other external forces, is that they know how to really respond to this. They know how to not make themselves the moment, not to be antagonized, to stay kind of within a certain kind of calmness to be able to react, because that's what we need.
Yes. No, I know. And I'm really grateful you will be coming to the Women's Summit as well and speaking. We're excited to have you. And so now in Virginia, do you have any plans in helping with registering voters, or do you just sort of still getting that started?
We're still in the process of getting that started and working towards, and one of the first things that we need to do, especially in Virginia, is everybody needs to vote early. I think that was one of the things that was mentioned earlier in the program. You have to make that concrete plan to vote. It's one thing to say, I'm committing to voting. I'm gonna make my way there one way or another.
Right.
You need to know whether you're actually registered to vote. And that's one of the things that Drag Out the Vote in Virginia and across the country this year we're going to do. We're going to continue to encourage our audience to know what your voter registration status is at all times. Just because you were registered last year or the last election, that may or may not be the case right now. Are you still on these voter rolls? You have to know what your status is at all times, because the only way to make any kind of change, no matter what issue, is to vote.
Oh, yes. And I can imagine it'd be great to have that in college campuses, different area. What fun way that you've called attention to voting. I just think it's fabulous. And just to get a little personal, if you don't mind, tell us about your journey in drag and how you got started. And I don't think we ever talked about that, if you don't mind sharing.
Of course. Well, I actually am not a drag artist. What I did, I actually I'm an actor. I went to the University of Central Florida for my BFA in acting, and I went to Florida State University for my degree, for my Master of Fine Arts in acting as well. What I have found, I started working at Drag Out the Vote about 2.5-3 years ago. I started a little bit as an admin. And what I quickly realized is that art and politics often lie within this intersection. And so I've had the opportunity over the last 2 or 3 years to work with some of the most amazing local and national drag artists across the country. including our national co-chairs, that being Britta Filter, Marty G. Cummings, Jeremy Carey, and our newest drag national co-chair, Cynthia Lee Fontaine. So definitely blessed on that.
Yeah. And so tell me just real quick about Florida. So how, I mean, with all the different bills going on down there, and is this been harder for you to operate in states like this to get things going? Or is it just still, because now we have these laws that think certain things are illegal?
No, you're absolutely right. What we've been seeing across the country, whether it be in Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Montana, is we're seeing a rapid proliferation of anti-LGBTQ bills that have been making their way through state legislatures. So far this year, there's been over 220 bills specifically targeting our transgender and our non-binary siblings. That's 45 anti-LGBTQ laws that have been enacted so far this year, 13 laws banning gender-affirming care for trans youth, 2 laws targeting drag performances, and in totality, 540 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures so far this year.
Yeah, it reminds me of our conversation we had about the abortion bills like this past year. Just you see this onslaught, how much legislation is moving on these things. Virginia, I think, was on the map of having at least 12 alone this year in 2023. So you're absolutely right. It's across the board.
No, 100%. And I think you mentioned, I think you had just mentioned abortion rights. And one of the things is that trying to connect this is that, they're targeting our trans siblings, and that's something that's extremely damaging and incredibly hurtful. They're piggybacking and continuing to perpetuate these anti-LGBTQ tropes and rhetoric. And one of the things that I want your audience to know is that targeting gender expression is an incredibly slippery slope. Today, it's targeting performers. But let me be very clear, women can and will be next. We're already seeing it this past January in Missouri. The legislature caused an uproar because it made a new rule for women's attire in the chamber, ensuring that they have to cover their shoulders. It really doesn't take a lot of imagination to see where this is going, and taking away bodily autonomy from anyone who isn't a cis white man. Yeah, you're right. On that note, you got us all fired up. And Chris, it's great to have you here. Be looking forward to meeting you in person. So thank you. Just stay with us to the end. If you can stay a little past 1, we'd love to have you in the room. No, absolutely. And I would love to, and just before we close out, I'd love to invite everyone to check us out at dragoutThe.vote. Please follow us on socials at dragoutthevote on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And if the spirit moves you, please donate. I'm going to put it in the chat. And if you want to reach out to me personally, please go ahead. We need all of the allies. We really need, the LGBT community is very good at galvanizing and heading to the polls. What we also need to do is invite our allies to speak up and let their voices heard. So thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Well, I am saying it's going to our closing segment. What great guests, what a great lineup. I want to bring up Heidi, our social media diva. I almost wanted to call you Heidi Drashek, but it's Heidi Dragneff. I know that.
Very similar.
Well, I know it just came Heidi out of. So let's talk about some school board outrage update from Heidi, because Heidi, you are just doing some awesome work around this. Let's see what you're doing.
So we have a graphic. If Robin can pull it up, I would love that. Yeah. We have a school board meeting coming up on June 12th where they're going to be talking about a resolution that was put forth by one of our school board members, Jessica Owens. And all it is renewing a resolution saying that they will not discriminate against LGBTQ plus students. And there has been a couple of school board members who have gone to their churches and emailed their congregations to show up to these meetings. So one of the ones we had in May, 111 people signed up to speak, and that does include students. And then the one that we just had on, I believe, the 23rd or 24th, there were 70 to 80 people signed up to speak, but the students have been speaking up since September. And what's happening is these people from the church are trying to disenfranchise the students and their voices and saying that they shouldn't be allowed to speak first. They shouldn't be allowed to have a student representative, have a seat at the table with the school board members. And we're also facing book banning. And so we would love if anybody in the area, in the Hampton Roads area, would show up just in solidarity with any kind of rainbow clothing or pride gear. We're not allowed to have anything that will obstruct view, so like flags and stuff like that. Like, I think the larger size ones, like the little handheld ones, I think are okay.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to invite people who like to dress in drag, we would be okay with that as well. And we just learned that our superintendent, Dr. Aaron Spence, is going to be taking a job as superintendent of Loudoun school boards. The school board in Loudoun will vote on it today at 5:30. So he already interviewed and accepted, which means that our super crazy QAnon school board members are going to be interviewing a new superintendent for Virginia Beach.
Yes.
So keep that on mind, and I will put the link in the chat for.
Okay, so for everybody in this room, I think one thing, pulling the lens back, the big lens, is what we know is that Loudoun is the hotbed in Virginia Beach, and they're going after school boards. And so it's up to us to really make sure we're showing up, especially now registering voters and getting out the vote. And this is where we know that they are trying to make a lot of chaos. And so it's interesting to me, it's happening loud, and after seeing the information of all the counties they're targeting, Republicans are targeting to make trouble in, and they think, and in the end, they can win the presidency even through those particular counties, and Loudoun County is on that list. So that does not surprise me. So thank you for that. I also want you to share and think about that postcard Heidi made. She did that on her own. She thinks differently all the time. She brings her creative spirit to all of her work. That's all we need to do is make little cards, show up at stuff, get people involved. And there's also a creative postcard initiative that the team has started and targeting into Virginia Beach areas with some really great information to just voters about what's happening in school boards. We can do this stuff. It just you coming up with that idea and making it happen. So thank you for that. Next week, I want to tell everybody that I'm really excited about the show. June 9th, we'll have Jennifer Carroll Four here. She will be talking about VMI and that what Youngkin's been doing with this attack on diversity. And Louisa will be here, will be great also. Kate Slayton, the Virginia 21's executive director, will be here. Planned Parenthood will be here. Han Jones and Jamie Lockhart will be here. And Andrea Bailey will be here. And Canon Servasian will be here talking about Medicaid and Medicare. We know people are getting kicked off of that. We will have quite a lineup. And by tomorrow, there could be more people on that show. Who knows? But we hope you do tune in. We hope you do tune in next week. We have a great show ahead for that.